Okay, yeah, so I want to talk about puns, because puns mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. To some people, it's that kind of annoying thing that people do sometimes. It makes you groan and roll your eyes. To other people, it's high art, it's Shakespeare, it's Molière, it's Swift. To me, it's a compulsion, it's an obsession. It's what my brain does when I'm not watching it. It's what hits me in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning with a thought that should not cross my mind, but I can't escape. And I think it's because I was a very literary child. I used to read an awful lot as a kid, and I kind of read pretty much every book you could imagine a kid reading, apart from the Baron von Munchausen books. But a friend of mine read all of those books and used to recount those stories to me in great detail. So in many ways, I got Munchausen by proxy. And I had a very odd upbringing, so I grew up in a place where we used to keep chickens, but we exclusively kept really rubbish, shit chickens. It was a poultry farm. And my dad, he used to neuter animals for a living. He called a spade a spade. It wasn't just chickens that we kept, we also kept herons. But one day I decided I didn't want to keep herons anymore. I thought I'd let the herons go. So I let the herons back out into the wild. And you know what? I've got no egrets. Birds have played a long, long part in my life. Recently, my favourite restaurant was overtaken by birds. All the chefs were kicked out and replaced by an invasive species of bird. It was a cuckoo, is what it was. Yeah, that's not a good one. This is what my brain does when I'm not watching it, you see. I get this horrible thought at 3 o'clock in the morning, like, do you think that Eskimos know when it's going to snow because they use their intuition? Is that a thing? Speaking of Eskimos, actually, there's an interesting thing about Eskimos, an interesting Eskimo fact, is the newsreader Jon Snow, who actually, do you know, he's got more than 1,000 different words for Eskimos. That's not a joke or a cliche, he's just super racist. And if you ever want to know what an Eskimo looks like, there's a couple of good examples of an Eskimo there. And this is just what my brain does. Ignore this one, that's a non sequiturs. I used to hate non sequiturs, but now my dad's a fireman. No, nothing for that one? All right. So my friend when I grew up, who was always interested in those Baron von Munchausen books, he was an observant Jew who was kind of like a Sherlock Holmes. He'd always keep Sabbath holy. He could never do any work at all on a Sabbath. He couldn't even boil a kettle. So if he wanted a cup of tea when he went around his house, he had to heat his water over one of those 7-pronged candles. That's how you make a cuppa. I think that's what he meant by ethnic menorah tea. A friend of mine is a French pilot. I went to visit her at an airport, and it was just as they were taking all the bags out of the plane, and all the bags were covered in snails. I said, what's that all about? She said, oh, that is cargo. My puns get me into problematic places in my head sometimes. For example, did you know that in Pyongyang, democracy has always been very, very tricky because of all the career politicians? And even worse than that, did you know that the Iraqi genocide only happened because Saddam Hussein thought the Kurds were in the way? And I like that pun because I get to combine dairy products and mass murder in a way I've never been able to do since the Camembert Rouge. My brain does this all the time. You see the words real IRA, that means a lot of things for a lot of different people. To me, it just makes me think, is there an unreal IRA? Like a fake IRA, like some kind of Sinn Féin, for example? But Ireland's in my head sometimes, so I always wanted to have an Irish cover band where I do Irish folk versions of French electro, and I want to call the band Air. And I once got bought a drink for saying that joke aloud the moment I thought about it, so I think that makes me a semi-pro at this stage. I was once at customs, in queue at customs. I noticed the security officer was only pulling people out for special treatment who were of Middle Eastern descent. I thought, that's borderline racism right there. I also have another friend of mine. I was at a fancy dress party with him. He came dressed as Hermann Goering, and we were having a very nice chat, and then randomly he decided to leave the conversation to go and find a vol au vent, and it turns out he was just following hors d'oeuvres. There's another friend of mine, she suffers from celiac disease, which is terrible, but she keeps eating bread because she's some sort of sadomasochist. And if you ask me, she's a gluten for punishment. This is just how my brain works, and I find that I have these little strange thoughts all the time. Like, for example, did you know that the Jive Bunny died of megamyxomatosis? And I once saw Tony Hadley on the street after Spandau Ballet split up. He looked very unkempt at that stage, to be honest. both those acts have tweeted me about those jokes when I've tweeted them online. I wish I could turn my brain off. I wish I could just blank it. I wish I could have that thing that Matt Damon had, where he had amnesia, where he was a secret agent, and he didn't realise he was a secret agent. I mean, I watched that film, I thought, he doesn't know he's born. All I'll say is, I apologise deeply, but just be thankful you aren't me. Thank you.